So obviously we are going to be talking and then asking questions while everyone's eating. Don't feel like you need to stop or that you need to be polite. It's just keep eating, and we will carry on. We're going to try to catch up a little bit on the schedule. We're a little bit behind schedule, so I will talk even faster than normal. And I really do want to encourage everyone to eat up. For those of you that are sticking around for the park meeting, you know what I mean? Eat up.
Oh, that's right.
You may want to take your rolls with you. I don't know if Alyssa has provided doggy bags for the desserts, but that's not really a bad idea.
I forgot about that.
True. Okay. So this session is about the economic case for college and career readiness. It was an idea that was presented by a number of you who said that you were really surprised, as we had been too, at the number of studies that came out over the past summer, over the past couple of months, that really seemed to reinforce the college and career ready agenda and the importance of the agenda from a workforce perspective and from an economics perspective. And so this is not something we have normally done at this meeting, but we thought it was really worthwhile to present that data more comprehensively. And we were lucky enough to get Tony Carnevale, whose name you have probably seen on a number of these very important studies, to discuss this with us a little bit more. So if you don't know, Tony is the director of the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce. The center studies the link between education, career, and workforce demands. Tony's report this summer talked about how the U.S. is really underproducing post-secondary educated workers, and has been since 1980. And if we don't manage to close that gap, what it will mean, particularly around our ability to lead, our ability to maximize our economic input, and also growing income inequality. It's really interesting stuff. One thing, notice that I said post-secondary, and I did that purposefully because Tony's work also really breaks down the number of post-secondary credentials in a more nuanced way. We're not just talking about bachelor's degrees, but associate's degrees and certificates, and what it looks like the economy of the future will demand. More recently, and I think Tony's probably going to kick off this way, talking a little bit about how the recent recession really accelerated this new economic trend, and you'll hear more about that. I should also point out that Tony's actually an old friend to Achieve. He did some of the original 2004 workforce research that led to the Ready or Not report, which led to our first college and career ready benchmarks in English and mathematics. So we appreciate seeing Tony again. So after Tony talks a little bit about his recent work, what he's seeing in the economy, what the trends look like, I've asked Brian Fitzgerald and Elaine Johnson to respond with some thoughts of their own. Brian is the CEO of the Business Higher Education Forum, which is the nation's oldest organization of senior business and higher ed executives. So I think he'll have some interesting comments about what all of this means from a business perspective, what businesses are already seeing, what higher ed is already seeing, and how they're responding to these trends. And then Elaine Johnson, who is the Vice President for Academic Affairs and Workforce Development at the Illinois Community College Board. She'll talk a little bit more about what this all looks like from a community college perspective. And we will manage to do that in 55 minutes, or Alyssa will have the hook. So with that, let me turn it over to Tony. Oh, and questions at the end.
I want to just give you a few signs along the way about the relationship between education and the economy. When I do that, keep in mind that I don't think that the only reason people go to school is to become foot soldiers for American capitalism. There are other functions for educators. The education system gives us an independent thinking citizenry that's critical to the preservation of our values. It is an institution that provides learning for its own sake. It is an institution that preserves values in professions and occupations, and in a sense is charged with teaching those values. We don't want doctors who only want to make money. And those values are important in lots of occupations and professions. So education is more than dollars and cents, although I'm pretty much going to stick with the dollars and cents in my brief remarks. I would say one thing from the point of view of a labor economist, though, and that is that while education does serve other functions other than economic functions, that in this society, the economic function is pivotal for educators. And the reason why is if in this society, this culture, we don't demand that you vote. You don't have to vote if you don't want to, and you might not want to. We don't prescribe many kinds of behaviors, hardly any at all, for individuals to be members of this culture. But the one thing that we do demand is that people work. And in this system, if you don't want to work, you have to have an awfully good excuse. Either somebody else who's going to take care of you, or you're going to have a hard time convincing the rest of us to take care of you. So work is a fundamental American requirement. In some ways, it defines what Americans are. Even our billionaires work 6 and 7 days a week. So that work is key. If educators don't provide people with the skills required to get a job, and as I'll argue in a second, that's more important now than it's ever been. If educators don't provide people with the skills required to get a job, it's very unlikely that they'll meet their other goals to make good citizens, good neighbors, good family members, people who take the time and have the inclination to love learning for its own sake. People who don't get enough education or the right education to get a job tend to stop participating in our politics. They tend to be disruptive family members. In worst cases, where work is not available for long periods of time, there's always the risk that people will create alternative cultures, alternative political movements, alternative and illegal economies that are a threat to the mainstream. So that this particular function in education, I would argue, is central. It is not the dominant one, but it is central. And the reason it has become more and more central is largely because of technology change in the United States and in the world. Technology in the last, at least among economists, we date the most substantial change, the surge in technology change since the end of the 1980-81 recession. Prior to 1980-81, we had overproduced education in America in the 1970s from an economic perspective. As a result of that, the value of a post-secondary education or training, the value of post-secondary learning had declined relative to the value of high school. It fell from 40 and 50% down towards 30% wage premium for post-secondary education. At that time, a lot of economists concluded, quite rightly, because it's what the evidence said, they were being faithful to the tools of their trade. They were being empiricists. What the evidence said was the value of college was going down. Richard Freeman, who still is arguably America's best labor economist, wrote a book back then called The Overeducated American. He was concerned that we were going to have youth rebellion in America. Actually, we already had it. And he was concerned that we were creating a revolution of rising expectations because we were educating so many people, especially beyond high school, and the jobs weren't there, that we were going to create huge tensions in American society. Another book that came out at the time, which is a better title I've always thought, was called The Great Training Robbery. But in the end, those analyses proved wrong. After 1980-81, the value of education began to rise very rapidly, unusually so. What happened was that at that time, we banished inflation with a very deep recession, the ugliest, greatest recession since the Great Depression, other than the one we're in now. And that one got rid of inflation and turned technology loose in the economy. As a result of that, work was restructured, and it was restructured in very powerful ways. Technology, essentially computer-based technology, tied to lots of other technologies, began to automate tasks and jobs very, very fast, and both physical tasks and mental tasks. As a result of that, the tasks that remained and the jobs that remained were not repetitive tasks. They were non-repetitive tasks. Non-repetitive tasks require higher skill levels. As a result, in the American system, the value of education in general, and in particular at the margin, the value of post-secondary education began to rise rapidly. At the same time that that was occurring, at the same time that demand was increasing, Larry Katz, who's a very fine economist, thinks about 3% per annum, starting in the 80s. We began to get a fall off in our production in post-secondary. Started at 3, went to 2. By the 90s, it was 1% increase. So we had falling supply, increasing demand, and the wage premium went sky high. It went from about 30% till 2002, it was 84%. It's flattened out and gone down a bit since then. The wage premium for post-secondary education, compared with high school or less, is now at about 74%. Some of that's the recession. Some of that may be structural change. We won't know till we come out the other side of this particular recession. And the evidence in this recession, as in the past two, it's one of the reasons we buy this about this recession. The last two recessions, what's happened is that process of technology change has accelerated. That's unusual. Prior to the recessions in the 90s, there was a lot of what's called temporary unemployment. The imagery is you used to work third shift in the factory. When the factory went down, they cut the third shift. When the recession was over, you got a phone call that said, come back to the job. You went back to the same factory, in the same industry, at the same workstation, working with the same people and the same technology. And that was about 30% of unemployment. That so-called temporary unemployment is almost zero now in the last two recessions, and we expect it'll be almost zero in this one. So there are lots of jobs that are going and they're not coming back. And those jobs are overwhelmingly jobs that require high school or less. And in addition to that, to the extent that people with some post-secondary lose their industry, more often they don't lose their occupation. They may lose their job, they may lose their industry. They won't get hired back in the same industry as they worked in before, usually in the same occupation if you have post-secondary education. So you're more flexible. You can move across industry more easily. So that is essentially the reason why, in the end, and policy has recognized this. Just one quick number about that is symbolic, but I think it tells the story. The last time we had a great recession, stagflation in the 70s, and the Great Recession, the second worst Great Recession in 80-81, the strategy we used was CETA, for those of you who are old enough to remember, the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. The U.S. Department of Labor ran our anti-recessionary strategy. In this recession, and ever since basically the 1980s, the emphasis has shifted from Labor Department programs to spending for education. We've essentially implicitly recognized that our education system is our workforce development system, especially the post-secondary education system, as the culminating experience in workforce development through education. And so a couple final points about this. That is, the game as it's played now is not the way it was played in the 70s. In the 80s, it began to change. It's still true that the more education you get, the better you're going to do, the more money you're going to make. A BA is worth about $2.2 million over a 40-year career. A high school dropout will make about $900,000. People with some college and certificates and AAs come out somewhere in between, about somewhere between $1.2 million and $1.7 million over 40 years. But there is a second rule, and that is what's new. And that rule is that what you take trumps degree level. What matters more now is the curriculum. So that it is true that if you get a certificate, to take you, an engineering certificate may take you a year and 4 months, or it depends on where you get it. It's one of the longer ones, It's one of the more high-paying certificates, not a degree. But if you get an engineering certificate, you'll make more than about 30% of bachelor's degrees, and about 20% of people with graduate degrees. The third rule in the game is that within occupation or within field, higher degrees usually trump lower degrees. So if you're smart enough to get an engineering certificate, you really need to go get an AA in engineering, because that will increase your earnings a lot more. And a BA in engineering, which will increase your earnings more. Still, a petroleum engineer is the highest paid BA in the economy at about $120,000 a year over 40 years. And many of the engineers follow suit, followed by business majors. At the bottom of the heap, I must add, are people who are counselors and people who work in education and non-BA occupations in healthcare. So that STEM and business are the two highest paying, most highly remunerated sets of degrees. And then finally, the final point about this is it's still true in the United States that even if you have the same engineering degree and the same job, same occupation, same degree, if you're a woman or if you're a minority person, you won't make as much as a white male. Those distances have closed, and the higher the skill level, actually the higher the degree level, and the more highly paid the occupation, the less difference there is. So skill scrubs away some of the discriminatory differences, classic discriminatory differences in the labor market. That is essentially how that system works. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. That's a fantastic presentation. You are all here today and over the past day or so really to discuss what is at the heart of your work in each of your states, and that is alignment. In the case of Common Core standards, we're talking about, and these are college and work ready standards, we're talking about alignment of curriculum and outcomes to higher ed and workforce needs. I want to follow on Tony's presentation remarks and talk to you about how well our education system is aligned with the very insightful presentation that Tony has given you, in a sense, the landscape of work and careers today. So I apologize, but I think the easiest way to do this is to give you a quick PowerPoint. Tony's point about skills, that it's less about what degree or certificate you earn, but more about skills. Here's a survey by Hart and Associates of 300 employers asking what skills, learning outcomes, and skills they desire. So what's really surprising to me, and Tony's done a lot of work in the area of STEM, the number one learning outcome among all employers, not technology, is concepts and new developments in science and technology. In addition, skills like analytic and problem solving, applying knowledge and skills to real world setting, critical thinking, effective communication, et cetera. So that's what employers say they want. Tony's point earlier about the returns to certain professions, et cetera, we are in a very serious recession, but we actually have within that a job shortage. We have a surplus and we have a shortage. So the top are these are the numbers of applicants, online applicants per opening. So the top three, I know you can't read it. The first one is farming, fishing, and forestry. We have almost 50 applicants per opening. In construction and extraction, almost 30 applicants per opening. And buildings and grounds and maintenance, almost 16 applicants per opening. Yet the most competitive are physical and life sciences, where we have 1 applicant per opening, computer and mathematical science, where we have 0.4, and healthcare practitioners and technical, where we have 3. So let's take a look at how well students coming out of P12 are prepared to go into post-secondary for any kind of degree or certificate, and how it aligns with the high demand jobs. These are BLS data, 2008 to 2018. One of the things that we've learned in doing some modeling around STEM, system dynamics modeling of STEM education as a system, is you both need to be interested in a STEM career and you need to be proficient in the precursors of STEM undergraduate education, and the most important of which is mathematics. So I'm going to show you how well students, all students who took the ACT college entrance exam, what they registered as their career interest, and how well they are joint distribution, interest and proficiency in math. So in a perfect world, we would have equilibrium across all of these. The signals would be sent, that, you know, Adam Smith's invisible hand would be working its magic. So just to look at one, Tony was talking about the importance of technology before. Computer science, computer specialties, a big family of technology jobs. Everything from, you know, people getting certificates in Oracle database management on up to computer science, and it's about 9% of all of the jobs. Let me back up. 54% of all jobs, job openings between 2008 and 2018 will occur in these top 5 areas. Of all of the students who took the ACT college entrance exams, 8.7% are interested in those careers and college ready in math. Computer science is a good example. About 9% of the jobs, less than 2% of students express an interest in computer science and technology and are college ready. So there is a very significant misalignment. And let me quickly dive into one of them. Tony was talking about STEM. This is particularly acute in the STEM disciplines. So here is the joint distribution of interest and proficiency among 12th graders. Interest in all STEM disciplines and college ready in math. 17.4%. 21% of men, 14% of women. But when we begin to break this down by race and ethnicity, of all African Americans who took the ACT exam, 5.7% are up in this, think of it as a Latin square, the upper northeast quadrant. Fully 25% are interested in STEM and not proficient in math, the northwest quadrant. So as we look at the fastest growing ethnic and racial minorities, we see them underrepresented in this northeast quadrant. The students, this is the likely pool of students for associate and bachelor's degrees. So we have a very significant misalignment here, and here's the racial and ethnic breakout. We see that, I know it's hard to see, but the far left-hand side is African Americans. Over 60% are not interested or proficient, and only, as I said, about 5.7%. Similar, though slightly different pattern among Latino, Hispanics, and American Indians. The other problem we have, and this is for those of you representing higher ed here, is we have a very serious out-migration problem in STEM. These are the this is attrition by discipline. And you can see that in mathematics and biology and computer science, very, very significant out-migration. So we have very few students who are interested in computer science and technology, very large out-migration, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to borrow a slide from Tony, shamelessly rip off one of his presentations to the PCAS working group that I'm a member of. His key point in a report that will soon be released is the very large diversion of STEM graduates. Once they graduate, are being pulled away from the STEM job market and into non-STEM jobs. So the bottom line is we have very bad alignment, and we have these are data are available on regional levels, et cetera, at the state level. Despite the fact that there are slightly different combinations for states, we see identical patterns across the states. There's very poor alignment with the high growth jobs. Those who are aligned with the high growth jobs, especially in STEM, are migrating out of STEM undergraduate programs. And even those who get STEM degrees are being diverted from those STEM jobs. So this is a very, very significant problem from a workforce perspective, and perhaps we can talk a bit more about that later.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here, and very good, Tony and Brian. I'm supposed to talk about the significance of community college in this process, preparing the workforce. I would just say that obviously this crowd is one that's convened several times, and we're all singing the same song, College and Career Readiness. We all believe in it. But I really do think this is the first time that community colleges are really at the forefront of making things happen. There's been a real mind shift on the importance of community colleges, along with our president, and just nationally, community colleges are recognized as the gateway from K-12 into the world of work and into the universities. Illinois has taken on the challenge for Complete College America. We're wanting 60% of our adults to have a meaningful degree or certificate by 2025. And the community colleges will have to play an important role with that. What we're doing in our state, and I think all the other states are doing it too, is that we have to do, the community colleges have got to be the ones that convene the partners. It's very important that we cannot get in our state to the number of jobs and the people of credentials unless we work with our K through 12 partners, our business and industry, and our university sectors. And I think from all the work we've done in the America Diploma Project and some of the other initiatives we've been in, it really has forced us to sit at the table and make sure that we have all the players at the right time. And the community colleges are the logical place to do that. So we have 48 community colleges in Illinois, and each one, now we have data that we can use to see where the jobs are, because that's some of the things that we haven't been able to see in the past. So we've got the jobs. We have the Department of Economic Affairs that we work with in Springfield that makes sure that we line our money and our investment in Illinois through the community colleges into industry-based sectors where we know there's a demand. In our state, we use the money that comes from our economic development side. When they need training and workforce, they funnel it through the community college system, and they will only fund initiatives that are sector-based where we know there's going to be employment at the end. So that is one piece that I think we're very important to do. I think that the fact that we are the providers of career and technical education, we have stackable credentials. I think that we're going to have to increase the amount of credentials that we are offering students, start reducing and making sure that everything is industry-based. I know on the Complete College America agenda, some of the comments that we have from the business and industry sector is that we really need to quit saying Complete College America. We need to be saying, because it's sending out the wrong message. So I think it's a messaging piece too, that our K through 12 students need to understand that there are many more jobs available for them without a 4-year degree, that we do have career pathways for students to get in. We're very active, and I think probably all the states are, with programs of study, being able to align the curriculum, as you were speaking about, with the 16 clusters. In Illinois, we have made a major push on STEM, and we are creating learning exchanges with business and industry, private sectors coming in and bringing in money to work around 9 areas in the STEM fields. And I think community colleges are just the part that can pull the partners in, I think even more so than universities, because we're community-based. I think another thing that we're forced to do, and you're talking about alignment, Brian, we all, since we have been doing this work with the American Diploma Project and the college readiness standards, that's been one of the best things that we've ever done in our state, and I think most other states will think that too, as we've done the process of sitting down with our community college faculty and university faculty with our secondary. It's been very easy for us to understand that our K through 12 teachers have been teaching to their standards, but they were just not aligned to what we said is college ready. And that's the work that I know all the states are embracing. We have 48 community colleges, we have 800 and some schools in Illinois, K through 12 schools. So we have a huge push, but people are buying in on it. The message is getting out. The fact that we can sit down with faculty members from secondary and post-secondary to make sure that students are coming in our doors prepared and that we are aligned. I think it's also important for community colleges to make sure that we have clear articulation through the university system that it's time for students to quit wasting hours in our community colleges and making sure that what they're taking is transferring. And talking about the need of the minorities and the population that we're going to be filling the workforce with, we're the ones that serve the underrepresented groups. I mean, if they're not coming to community colleges, they're not getting education on the majority. We find that in Illinois for sure. So I think it is our responsibility to work and make sure that people are successful when they get in our doors. I think that we have a good system of community college. I think we all do, but we still have a lot of work to do. We really need to make sure that students are getting degrees that's meaningful, that we need to stop approving programs that are not meaningful, and that we're making sure that we're dealing with business and industry, that we have their credentials, that we're making sure that's what business and industry want. But we also have to shift our mindset too on how we deliver in the community colleges. I think we've made some improvements. We've got a terrible problem with developmental education across all the states, and it's, we're hoping in long term the Common Core will help eliminate a lot of that as we increase the math requirements in our high schools. We hope that will make the case, but also the way we deliver developmental education. We keep the students too far along in the system. We have to fix that because we lose them. You'll see that we do a good job at enrolling students, but we have to make sure that they have credentials and stay in school. So I think we are right at the prime of community colleges to have the greatest impact on any part of the training in the United States. So I think that's...
Thank you. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for the comments, and thank you, Tony, for kicking us off. I want to ask the panel one question, but before I do that, I just want to alert you to a couple of things I should have said before. One, Tony's slides are on your table. You should have copies of Tony's slides. If you don't, we will, as we always do, post the Tony slides with our materials. We'll also make sure that you get Brian's slides. So for those of you who are interested in those, we'll make sure that you get those. I wanted to ask just one question of the panel. To get us started, and then we're going to take questions, so the mic runners can get ready. Sometimes with this sort of research, there can be criticism that it's too sensitive or can be too sensitive to really current workforce needs or business needs, filling jobs that we know about now as opposed to longer term projections. So how do we think about aligning a system that really does meet the long-term needs of business and industry and individuals too, so that we're not just giving people certificates that, maybe we need a bunch of welders today, but maybe that's not the right job for the future. So how do we think about that and plan for that, both from your perspective, Tony, and sort of what your research shows, but then from an institutional perspective too?
Let me start.
You
Tony?
Sure.
Okay. Well, I think what we need to make sure we're doing in the community colleges to meet that need is you have to be working with the economic development people in your state, because we know for the community college system that students that in our state, that 9 out of 10 students that go to the community college and get a certificate or a degree stay within that district or in that region. So we don't have a lot of migration out of the community college system with associate and applied science degrees. So with that field, I think that we have to sit at the table with our economic development groups in business and industry to make sure that what we need in our state is reflective in the data.
It is a matter of balance. That is, general education matters most in grade school. It begins to diminish in importance as you move through high school and towards the labor market. It diminishes a fair amount, that is the value of general education, when you get to college. Now, that is to say, part of the evidence of that is that only about 10% of college degrees, that is BAs, are now in the liberal arts and humanities. The rest are really occupational. The other, and then, less than half of community college degrees are occupational. When you add in the certificates, it's more than half. General ed degrees at community colleges only have value if they lead to 4-year college education.
Correct.
So there's an issue there between general ed and occupational. Having said that, occupational education, that is the process of becoming an engineer, is very much general education. That is, engineers are problem solvers. There is a further issue that has to do with the value and the genesis of competency. And that is that there are knowledge is one thing. Knowledge comes in domains. So engineering is a domain of knowledge. You need to read books about engineering to know what engineers know. The issue then becomes, what can engineers do? And in order to get skills like problem solving, it is generally agreed by psychometricians that you have to learn these general skills in the context of some knowledge domain. That is, you can't simply have a course on problem solving, because problem solving for STEM workers is different than problem solving for a school teacher, is different for problem solving for a lawyer, is different still from problem solving for a pharmacist. So, there is a balance between specific knowledge or domain knowledge. You never want, and the balance is such that you don't want to make anything so specific that there's no career pathway, and you don't want to make anything so general that there's no career pathway. A BA in Russian literature, unless you're going to teach Russian literature, won't have a lot of labor market value. That's the harsh truth of it. People with BAs in the liberal arts make $42,000 a year on average over a career. People with BAs in petroleum engineering make $120,000 a year over a career. Different specific knowledge has value, and the issue then becomes, how do we know what the career pathways look like? And the answer to that is, a lot of you have SLDS grants. The first thing we do is we hook up your SLDS curriculum data, your transcript data, to wage records from employers. That allows us to follow anybody in any college or high school program through their entire career in the labor market. That tells us what careers look like retrospectively. We've had the wage record data since 1937. This is not a new idea. We need better information systems here. And to some extent, yes, the petroleum engineer may be oversupplied in 5 years. But that just means you need to be a pretty good engineer, and when you're in the engineering program, the college should tell you what happened to the last 50 engineers that graduated from your program.
Really helpful. Okay, let's open it up for questions.
Good. We're done.
Wow, oh, wait, I see somebody running.
Tony can go eat his dessert.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm Donna Johnson from Delaware, and I wanted to follow up with some of the comments that you were making about STEM and some of the things that we've heard in many other presentations and many other places. When people talk about STEM, it doesn't seem that there's been a very strongly or well-defined definition of exactly what they mean, other than identifying an acronym. So when you talk about STEM career majors and you talk about STEM fields, it seems like that is much more narrow than the scope of STEM education. So could you talk a little bit about what you mean by people leaving STEM fields and coming into STEM fields, and what that looks like in your slides and what you were talking about?
You want
I think it's you, Brian.
There is some controversy here, although not much. There is an official definition of STEM. The Bureau of Labor Statistics defines STEM as science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. That's a very specific set of occupations. They then toss in social science, because social scientists are insulted if they're not treated like engineers. So I'm an economist, so I understand the feeling. But the truth is, when you do work on STEM, you should...
I know engineers, Tony, and you're no engineer.
That's right. Absolutely. So, you know, as my mother used to say, she had 3 sons, they were all doctors, and none of them could help her.
Yeah.
But in the end, when we do work on STEM, we throw out the social scientists. We do it for 2 reasons. I think in the common mind, a STEM worker is a science worker, not a healthcare worker, not a professional and business service workers. A lot of people do STEM, which is S-H-T-E-M, and throw healthcare in. That confuses the game, I think. So STEM, narrowly conceived, is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, except social science. The other thing is, if you throw social science into STEM, STEM looks a lot better in terms of how accessible it is to women and minorities. So it's sort of cheating, I think. When you look at STEM in a much more narrow way, it doesn't look so good. It ends up being overwhelmingly white and male.
Just to go to your question of STEM education versus STEM, I think if you think of a STEM ecosystem, there are STEM education, for example, that slide about what business wants, the #1 knowledge area is knowledge of and new developments in science and technology. So for example, in undergraduate education, there used to be, core requirements. Who knows whether there are today or not. An elective science was one of them. Most often, because it was easier, people took biology. But there is a body of science education, and that's really about scientific literacy, if you will. STEM disciplines are really computer science and biology and chemistry and physics and engineering and all of the bioengineering and all of the combinations and permutations within those. But those are all specific disciplines with undergraduate and graduate programs. They're well defined, often in schools of engineering and colleges of science. And the one thing they have in common, with the exception of engineering, ironically, is they have very high out-migration and virtually no in-migration from outside STEM. That when you do these migration studies, Sloan Foundation funded one of them at 18 highly selective public and private 16 highly selected public and private research universities and 2 liberal arts colleges that have engineering programs. All of the migration is out, and there is virtually no in-migration whatsoever. The notable exception is engineering. 77% of students who start in engineering finish in engineering, and 83% who start in engineering finish with a STEM degree. All of the others are, in the 20s and 30%. So a little bit on the nomenclature and the numbers.
Well, I will tell you what we've done in Illinois, which is a little different probably than most states, but as our economic development wing, along with education, we've identified 9 what we call career clusters in the STEM field. So we've expanded our definition in Illinois, and that's where we're building these learning exchanges with private business. So we can provide that information with anybody if you want it.
If I could, just let me give you one example of why STEM is so important. Tony's talked about the importance of technology. That's how we've achieved the efficiency and productivity we've had. What happened to the the global corporation over the 90s and the last decade is every one of them has become a technology company. They may not produce it, they may not sell it, but they use it. Mm-hmm. And one of our member CEOs runs an insurance company in the Midwest. And when they did their census, fully 1/3 of their entire workforce were technology workers. And he could not get chief scientists, computer scientists, in the US. He was importing them using H-1B visas from India. Another CEO in Iowa had a similar problem. And you look at these two companies and you think about the impacts on their community. That company in Iowa offshored the entire IT operation to India. So these considerations in a state like Illinois and the different regions within Illinois are very, very important to economic development and to individuals and families. If you think about that graphic of the openings, job and the student interest and proficiency, if students are not in a trajectory toward high demand jobs, it means they're in a trajectory toward low demand jobs. Lower wages, higher probability of unemployment, longer periods of unemployment, and very significant impacts on individuals and families. So getting this workforce mix right is really essential, and it's absolutely crucial now if we're going to work our way out of this recession and prepare ourselves for the next real boom in technology that will occur when the economy recovers.
Great. I think we've got time for one more question, if anybody's brave enough to raise their hands. Okay, and while the mic is getting over to Lucille, one thing I thought for the work that you're doing, most of you were doing going forward, one thing that really struck me about Brian's slide, I think we know it, and we sometimes see evidence of it, but I thought, Brian, you sort of presented it to us in a different way, is how much, and of course this starts early, this isn't a college thing, is how much people's proficiency in math holds them back, even when they're interested. And that is something that I know you're all working on, and that's something that we actually can do something about. Because if people that were interested in math, or were interested in STEM fields, and had proficiency in math, if we actually close that gap, the picture would look a lot different according to your slides, and I think that's really telling.
Make one comment
Yeah,
about that?
absolutely.
One of our members is the Office of Naval Research. The Chief
Yeah.
of Naval Research is a member of ours. ONR has invested over the course of 20 years in cognitive science at a number of universities around the country, including Carnegie Mellon. Those investments have really spun off Carnegie Learning. What has happened is that there is now a first-generation set of intelligent tutors in math, reasoning, and math calculations, in reading, et cetera. And it's based on both cognitive science and artificial intelligence. And if there's one problem that we could all solve, the math remediation problem, it would mean we would free up huge resources in higher education to train everyone. And these tutors, I mean, I know you're all here to work on this in the long term, but think about the statistic that I gave you before. 25% of African Americans who are interested in STEM but not proficient. When we do the drill down into the distribution of those scores, a third of those 25% are within 4 test points of college readiness. These tutors are able to move students between 1 and 2 standard deviations with 40 hours of contact with them. So we need high leverage strategies in the short run to make sure that students who are interested in all of these high growth careers are not kept out of them because of lacking basic math proficiency.
And I think, Brian, that's a very good point, because what we see is 50% of our students coming into our community colleges on the average are taking remedial math or developmental math. Some of our districts, Chicago, 90% of the students coming in need developmental math. So what happens is, you said, when they're going in to look at their majors, when they have a long line of remediation, they'll switch over majors because it's not obtainable for them, and it's just easier to go the other route. So you're absolutely right, it is critical.
Lucille Davey from New Jersey, former commissioner, and now with the Hunt Institute in North Carolina. I guess just a comment now, we're getting to the end here. As someone who almost out-migrated or tried to out-migrate from a STEM field back in the 70s.
You didn't make it out?
I didn't. I was a math major, and the requirement for my undergraduate degree was 61 credits. By the time I was in the middle of my junior year, when I decided that the teaching was so horrible and so poor, and that this field would not hold any promise for me any longer because I was not one of those people born with the math gene. But good teaching allowed me to develop a great potential, and I was hugely interested in mathematics. But the teaching got to be so horrible at the college level that I wanted out. And as most of my classmates, I mean, we started with probably 30 or 40 math majors. I think maybe 10 of us finished. Right. And all the women except for me and one other dropped out along the way. Most of them went into math education because that was a good fallback because you could then use the math credits and apply it and still graduate. Anyway, I didn't want to take more than 4 years to finish, so I stuck it out. But I ran from there and went to law school.
And that was a good decision?
But the point, well, it turned out to be an okay decision. But the point of this is that, it seems to me that the real challenge for all the people in this room and all of us across the country is, how do we transform mathematics teaching, not only K-12, but also at the college level? Because until we make this accessible, young people think they can't do this. I've also taught math, by the way. Practicing law, I taught math at night at the community college level. And what I learned was, I had lots of students who said, I never thought I could do math. No one ever explained it the way you did. We've got to figure out how we transform the teaching of mathematics so that young people don't believe they can't do it. They believe that they can. Because, it's just like reading. We don't believe that we can't teach every child to read. We have to believe that we can teach them all mathematics, and we've got to support teachers K-12 and in higher ed to really make that transformation. I think it's a huge challenge.
That is absolutely true. Now, I see Mike walking up here. He is the official hook, so we're going to have to leave it with Lucille's comment, even though I think we probably all had things that we wanted to say. But I wanted to thank the panelists, Tony, Brian, and Elaine, for their comments.
Thank you.
And look forward to continuing this discussion because it's a really important part of our work, both as a foundation, but also in terms of communications and messaging. You are on solid ground with the agenda that you're pursuing in the states. Thank you.